How do we beat the devil out of the fog machine? Bob Ross vibes only.
Perception is reality. Perspective shapes the world around you. I'm JJ Weinberg, and this is my perspective.
Greetings and salutations. My name is JJ Weinberg. I'm an artist, an activist, an alchemist, a musician, and I am none of these things. I am Bob Ross. Hi there, folks. My name is Bob Ross. Today, we're going to go on a little journey and paint some happy little trees. Just remember, in this life, there are no mistakes, just happy accidents. Nope, that's me still again. I want to thank, first of all, before we get into this episode, Boga Barnes and Denny, the underwriters for this program. Thank everyone here at WVLP. But I have to talk about Bob. What about Bob? Bob's your uncle. People think I'm obsessed with Bob. I'm obsessed with imagination, creativity, license to believe in a dream. That's what Bob means to me. So it's not Bob. It's what he embodied. It's not Fred Rogers, the man. It's what his mission was, what he was pointing us to. Bob Ross and Fred Rogers, they were a moral compass for our nation, for our youth, for a time. Sesame Street. Fred Rogers, though, went to lobby Congress in 1969. He had to testify to the merit and the meaning behind the work that he was doing. Without Fred Rogers standing up, we would have a different timeline. I consistently have talked about Back to the Future here. It's one of my favorite movies. It informs a lot. Again, imagination, creativity. But I think about that timeline. Marty, he sees Gray's Sports Almanac. If you're not familiar, I'm sorry. You're probably not listening to this show because we have to have some sort of common ground, and you would have watched Back to the Future too by now. But if you don't, I'll give you a little background. And forget it if I'm giving any spoilers because, you know, the movie's 20, 40 years old, whatever it is now. Back to the Future 2, Marty, they go in a time machine into the future, and Marty sees the Gray's Sports Almanac, and it shows all of the history of sporting events. And he gets this idea, oh man, if I take that back with me to the past, I can make a little bit of money, you know, betting on all the things that I know. Well, Doc, of course corrects him there when he says that. What the heck is this? And again, it only because it accidentally slips out. If it hadn't fallen from the bag that it was in, you know, we'd have a different reality, a different timeline. And that's one of the main fascinating things that Back to the Future 2 has shown me through my life. And now, of course, when we talk about quantum mechanics, we talk about the observer effect on reality. We talk about the multiverse and different timelines existing. Science is exploring this, string theory. So the idea is, though, Doc, you know, he sees this book, he corrects Marty for basically his greed. And that's one thing that I didn't think about a lot when I was younger. It wasn't actually until this year that it really dawned on me that the impetus for this whole thing, for Biff Tannen, for the dark timeline that comes about, is Marty's greed. It's Marty's you know, just kind of wanting to shortcut things. It wasn't, I mean, of course, Biff heard it and took that and employed it by delivering himself at a younger age, this book of future knowledge, which then he uses and it amplifies the worst in him. The reason why it's prevalent to this conversation is because the allegory inside the film, Biff Tannen, Biff's pleasure paradise in this dark timeline that's created and skewed from the moment that he gets this book. He creates this basically demagogue with gold-plated toilets and casino empires. I mean, I don't really have to spell it out to realize that it sounds like Donald Trump. Well, that's because, of course, as they were writing the film, and Back to the Future 2 came out in 1989, November 22nd, 1989, Back to the Future 2. But they're already using Donald Trump's caricature, this weird obsession and the kind of the tacky version of Vegas mentality as the villain. This is in 1989. This is way before MAGA, red hats, the identity politics that we're surrounded by now. But they had already identified him as such. So for me growing up, Biff was always the bad guy. It was very easy to see Trump as this caricature, this whimsical, insecure, all the things that you see in Biff Tannen. I'm like, well, that's who I thought Trump always was. But we can't lose sight that if it weren't for Marty having that idea, that reality never would have existed. And the reason why I bring that up is because we still have to see. We always have to look in the mirror and say, where am I like this? Where am I short or insecure? Where am I egotistical? Or where can I not hear criticism? All of those types of things. And that's what that idea of realizing that Marty was the start of that negative timeline. I say sometimes we got to look in ourselves and say, where did we start such and such a negative timeline? So without Fred Rogers lobbying Congress, going to a Senate hearing in 1969, we wouldn't have there would be no Bob Ross. There would be no land of make-believe. There would be no Sesame Street. For me, in particular, I've talked about it, I think, here before. There would be no Mark Kistler. Mark Kistler taught me some of the early fundamentals of how to draw and set me on course to being here in this exact seat in front of this microphone. I could trace it back like 6 degrees of separation. Telling my mom when I was 10 years old, Mom, I'm going to the American Academy of Art. I was convinced as a 10-year-old that's where I was going, where I ended up meeting my best friend that took me to music, and on down the line, I could tug on that string of serendipity and pull on the whole thing. But if it weren't for Mr. Rogers, for Fred Rogers going to Washington, then we would have a different timeline. Arguably, a darker timeline. And so they've spent years now on this, with this fake media trope, this idea that the public media, NPR and PBS, Biff Tannen has told us it's fake news. It's just so fascinating to me that people would listen to Biff Tannen. When we look at the film, I don't know if there's anybody who are like, aside from being a fan of the character as he's played, like you appreciate that. I do think that's great. Tom Wilson does a great job, but who's rooting for Biff Tannen? How do you root for Biff Tannen? You know, kicks the kid's ball onto the roof. Go get it. This is your ball. Such a bully. It's so, I mean, he's such a stereotypical, easily framed bully. But so they've spent years now, this administration, creating a phantom version of public media in people's minds. It's an absolute hallucination. It's a fog. You know, the boogeyman made of buzzwords, the radical left, the woke propaganda. And again, of course, the fake news. But I was thinking about it this morning, right? Like right when I woke up, I already had it in my head, fully formed. I don't know why, but I was like, the next time I hear that, and as I'm on this mission for the Million Bob March, if you don't know, last year was the first inaugural Million Bob March in Washington, D.C. We showed up throughout the summer and in through the fall to these Bob mobs. Basically, imagine in your mind a sea of blue denim and afro wigs, canvas paintings as protest signs that say Bob Ross vibes only. Big Bird marching with us, Mr. Rogers, people laughing, smiling, pointing, taking pictures. The joy of protesting is really what it is. And we did that last year. My first protest as Bob in my Ross play, if you will, was in front of Trump Tower on the 4th of July. Now, of course, the 4th of July, independence and this idea, but it's also the year that, or the date that Bob Ross passed. So it was the 30-year anniversary of Bob's passing, the last 4th of July, when I went and protested solo as Bob in front of Trump Tower, advocating for public media. And then, of course, got some coverage for that, started talking at public events like Congressman Mervan, bringing it up in his, fireside chat type of things, being able to talk to State Senator Shelley Yoder here in Indiana. I'd sent her the PBSA, the Protect Bob Station Act. Imagine that, like this idea of I'm just a bill. I'm just a bill. Schoolhouse Rocks. PBS informing me from the time I was a kid and it coming back full circle to where I would write a Protect Bob Station Act and say, I want to get this voted on specifically about reinstating funding for public media. Shelley Yoder at the time, she read it. She said, I love this. What do you need from a state level champion? Talked to Congressman Mervan. Just recently, I shared Congressman Mervan late last year in 2025, was on a PBS video talking about the Million Bob March, because this matters. Public media matters, both from the creative imagination of Bob Ross and Fred Rogers, and then, of course, from the accountability of a news source that's not supposed to be dependent on corporate dollars. Why in the world? First of all, the Reagan administration finally obliterated the fairness doctrine in media, which then spawned shortly after Fox News, opinion-based, and so then polarizing, making news as its consumer product, polarizing. And then it's like, where's the accountability? Where's journalistic standards? They're out the window on purpose. And so public media is supposed to be the last bastion of that, the place that holds everyone accountable, whether you're Donald Trump or Barack Obama, whether you're, Bill Clinton or George Bush, whatever it is. So I'm thinking, though, this morning, I wake up and I'm thinking about this fog, because they say, first, let me go back again. The argument is when I'm saying, I'm not asking you to choose left or right. I'm asking you to choose between the tone of Bob Ross and the tone of Donald Trump. I'm asking you to choose, if you were to have an example for character for your children, would it be Mr. Rogers or Biff Tannen? Like, if it makes it easier for you, if it makes it more comfortable for you, if you have some sort of cult of personality, fascination, love for Donald Trump. Take it away from him. Go to Biff Tannen. Who do you want as a character example for your children? Biff Tannen or Donald Trump? It's pretty simple. So on the public media, PBS, Mr. Rogers, Bob Ross, Mark Kistler, Sesame Street side of things, I don't feel like I get a lot of conflict. Although I will say, they'll say, no, Sesame Street is now woke and it's polluting our children's brains. I mean, Sesame Street has always shown people in the inner city to people outside of the inner city, in rural areas. It's made a bridge of different colors, different ideas, different religions, different perspectives. That's what Sesame Street has always been, a bridge. And then to say, oh, well, this is all woke. It's like, are you going to tell me that Mr. Rogers was woke? Because if you had a voice then, you would have been saying the same thing. Because Mr. Rogers sitting and soaking his feet in a pool with Officer Clemens, who is a black man, he's soaking his feet inside this pool just to cool off. A simple act of friendship, but man, that's so Christ-like, right? It's a powerful stand against racial segregation, particularly in public pools. That was the thing, you don't, there's the white pools, the black pools, all of that segregation. You would have been calling him, the same people who would say that Sesame Street is woke now would have been calling Mr. Rogers woke in that moment. And that's their Make America Great Again. Back before Mr. Rogers even would soak his feet in a pool with Officer Clemens. But when it comes to the media side of it, the news aspect, it's like, oh, we're really off the rails. Because NPR, they're again, radical left. And I thought about it this morning. I was like, oh, I know what to take into this season of Bob Mobs, what to take in as I build for the second annual Million Bob March. In DC, October 29th, it's Bob's birthday. Go to happylittlehairdos.com or jjweinberg.com. You can find him through both. I'm going to start really building this again, and I need some Bobs. I need some Bobs with me. They named it Tactical Frivolity. I've never heard of that until later last year, late in 2025, when I actually appeared as my Bob Ross meets the Punisher character, the Varnisher, fighting to save PBS, ready to beat the devil out of him. I appeared as the Varnisher at a No Kings protest in October, and then I was actually in a New York Times article about this idea of tactical frivolity. It's just something that I've done. Back in 2008, I got arrested, if you're not familiar with this story, for protesting the dependency on fossil fuel, the socio-political ramifications of that dependency. And look at us now. Look at us now. It's 2026. This war with Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, all of these things. And I was talking about it from the roof of a gas station in 2008, got arrested. And again, I guess you would call that, they would call it tactical frivolity now. I was being frivolous. I was doing it on purpose to make a point and also to reach into this idea of shared stories and virality. And then that year after my arrest, I was doing a lot of radio and television interviews and newspaper interviews. And then to kind of punctuate the protest, to take it a little bit away from the frivolity, I was like, well, what could I do that would still be in this vein, but pushed it a little bit further? I rode a bicycle from Valparaiso, Indiana to Washington, D.C. I wasn't a cyclist. I didn't even have a bike at the time. I actually started reaching out to people locally first. They're like, I can't give you a bike. I'm giving you a bike for free. Are you crazy? So then I reached out to larger bike companies. And the first one I hit up was Trek. That's the biggest one I could think of. And they sent me out a $1,500 road bike and said, do it. Shout out to Rebecca Anderson for that at Trek. She's not there anymore. But anyway, all of that said, I ride a bicycle to DC in this protest, and a way to punctuate what I was trying to say, that there's a steam behind this, behind a vision, behind, there's a conviction behind this. It's not just frivolity. And then, of course, last year, I showed up to the same steps that I rode my bicycle to, but I showed up as Bob Ross. I showed up with a handful of other people. And our goal this year is to get at least 10,000 Bobs out there. I need your support. I need you to sign up. I need you to help. I'm going to need donations. I need a budget to make this thing really, really happen. And I'm going to be unveiling more of that stuff here in future episodes. But circle back. I keep coming to this thing of this fog idea that I woke up to, NPR. And the argument against NPR being that it's woke left media. When in my mind, it's like, if Biff Tannen is calling it woke left media because it holds him accountable, let's just say, for instance, NPR says, this just in, Biff Tannen found to be in possession of Gray's Sports Almanac, best betting history from da-da-da-da. And so let's just say it does that. Biff will call it fake news because he doesn't want to be held accountable. I mean, that's so basic. I mean, you don't need to go to George Orwell's 1984 and a Ministry of Truth, Mini True, as it's called in the book, abbreviated, and then really Truth Social. I mean, are we just reading from 1984 and kind of putting it and pointing it in people's faces, rubbing their nose in it? Like, just anything that's inconvenient to me is fake news. It's like, again, with Marty, it being his responsibility in some space that Biff even got this idea. The reason why I'm thinking that again now is, where has someone criticized you and you called it fake news? I'm trying to think of something right off the top right now for me. It'll probably come to me. And I guess mainly the thing is, I wouldn't call it fake news. I would be inclined, I hope. And if you know me and I've done this to you, you can leave me an email and I'll talk about it on the next episode. If I've offended and I do something wrong, I try to apologize. I don't, and even if, at the very least, I guess what I'm saying is, I wouldn't call it fake. Like, if you said that I had said and done such a thing, I would justify why I thought that was the right thing to do. I certainly wouldn't call it fake. So I guess there's no place that I do that. And that's why it's so confusing that people buy that. It's so weird. But this idea that NPR is just fake news, I would say now, as I go into this new Million Bob March season, and I'm trying to, I'm not trying to make this a left or right thing. So I am trying to pull people from, the other quote unquote side of the issue. And to speak to that, there are actually 4 Republicans that voted against canceling these funds for public media. So that you can see right there, it already isn't just a binary issue. But if I'm going to reach across, and I know one of the first arguments I'm going to hear is, well, even if you're okay with Bob Ross and Fred Rogers and Sesame Street, which again, we've said there are extremes that say that they're even not right. If you're okay with that, but you're going to say, well, it's just this woke media. The idea is, I've tried to push back against it in the wrong way. From now on, I'm just going to hold the people to the question. And I talked about this in the last episode, we have this inherited rage from our identities that we get from our parents, we get it from our culture, where we live, our community, this tribalism. And so then we have this rage, this bubble that just comes up in our brain like the alligator brain, the fight or flight. It's an attack on my identity. So there's a pressure point, right? To just say, okay, if that's true, show me like 5 places where you can show me that with NPR, what you're talking about. Show me 3. Actually, show me 1 place. Show me 1 place, not a commentator talking about something that NPR said, not someone reacting to it, not a meme about it. Show me the actual PBS episode, the actual NPR segment. Show me the actual transcript, the actual sustained pattern of an indoctrination that you're claiming exists. So like, it's not on me to show. That's what I would think about in the past is like, well, let's go back to past administrations and see where NPR has held Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or Joe Biden accountable for XYZ. It's more so like, because again, if the offenses are less in any given thing, let's take another Republican administration, just say George Bush, even though this is laughable, let's just say George Bush had less offenses. He definitely has less offenses than Donald Trump. So the argument stands, well, it's not as prevalent, right? Because we're not calling out his offenses as often as we would with Trump because they're every day, right? But so show me one of these things where they're not just saying 2 + 2 is 4. Donald Trump's on the mic saying 2 + 2 is 5 one day. The other day he's saying 2 + 2 is 3. And each time NPR covers it, they say, Donald Trump found saying 2 + 2 is 3. 2 + 2 is 4. And they didn't even say that 2 + 2 is 4. They might just tell you that Donald Trump is saying 2 + 2 is 3. Then and they cover another story where he's saying Donald Trump is saying that 2 + 2 is 5. And you can't use that as an example. That's why I'm saying, show me the examples. When it comes to this NPR argument against Donald Trump, I'm going to say to the person, show me the examples. I have one person in mind in particular. He's said he's a family member. I love him dearly. And he agrees about the overarchingly that public media shouldn't be defunded, but he also is like, well, if they weren't so leftist, like he's going to be the exact person I say, show me what you mean by leftist. Leftist doesn't mean reporting that Donald Trump said 2 + 2 is 3. Leftist doesn't mean saying and reporting that Donald Trump said 2 + 2 is 5. That is reporting. Like the cult of personality, the branding, the propaganda of fake news and everything's left and right because somebody's talking about the truth. I mean, that's just so crazy. So my thing to my family member and of course anyone else, but it's going to be, show me the 3 places. Because again, if out of those 3 places, 2 of them already are just basic bad math references, that doesn't mean that that's leftist media for covering bad math. So show me the places. Show me 1. What I know will happen is, well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's there. I don't like it because it's there. I mean, I know it happens. Really? Show me. That's what I'm talking about. We allow ourselves to go into these caricatures. I mean, that's where we're so susceptible. In propaganda, the last couple episodes talking about Israel and Zionism and a homeland and Palestinians and Jews and Christians and Jews. when we allow ourselves to just be arrested by these sweeping caricatures and stereotypes. Show me one place. And if you go into this, the reality is most people that are attacking public media have never actually consumed it consistently. Again, they inherited an opinion about it. Inherited. And it might not just be, again, from parents. It could be just from their selected binary news source or from their cult of personality leader. They absorb this narrative about it. They're told what it is by the same outrage machine that profits from perpetual division. That's really the grotesque irony. The very same people screaming propaganda are often parroting propaganda. So this fog, like propaganda, works by exhausting clarity. AI did it, wasn't me. It overloads people emotionally until they don't even demand proof. They don't ask for it. Like, that's what I'm doing consistently. That's what I hope you're doing. That's what we're doing on Perspective in this radio show, on this podcast. It's what I do with my art, my music, my creativity. That's why my Bob Ross parody is backed by purpose. That's why the meme moves into meaning. Because it's the tactical frivolity of it is just, this is humor, this is parody, this is satire, this is Mark Twain to get you laughing. This is a little Dave Chappelle to get us comfortable, but then we got to examine. We can't just stop. We've got to try and get clarity. We have to hammer down. We have to demand proof. Otherwise, we're conditioned to reaction before reflection. We see that at scale. Social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, they don't want reflection. They want your reaction first. Your reaction on the post is literally fuel for the matrix, the machine, the simulation. It's what keeps you on the screen. And on the screen means eyeballs, energy, time, which means money to them. We are the batteries for the matrix. The movie shows it in this other way, but we're literally, especially if we're reacting before reflection. And it goes to alligator brain, fight or flight syndrome, trigger, 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 trigger. Get you excited, boom, 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 respond, respond. You don't have time to reflect. You don't think about reflecting. And that's that inherited emotionality. You're just reacting from a tribal space. And then like we should be so far outside of tribalism at this point. But that alligator brain, that explosion, that chemical cocktail that explodes in your brain and causes you to react. Go back to Viktor Frankl. We always circle back to Man's Search for Meaning. A human being is a deciding being. If you're not deciding, you're reacting, you're having this emotional, visceral reaction to the thing. You're fuel you're the combustion. Boom, the explosion. And then your explosion sparks another explosion, either someone who agrees or disagrees with you. And that fight is what keeps the engine of this social media machine running. And at large, even for-profit media machines. That's why public media is so important. It's so important because it shouldn't be at the behest of dollars. And if we don't support that, left or right, wherever you're at, that's the danger to me. We keep going into fight or flight and us versus them emotionality without reflection. Viktor Frankl, a human being is a deciding being. We're not deciding in that moment. We're becoming programmed automatons, firstly, from the binary. left or right, ones or zeros. But we're also, through that polarity, becoming the battery for the matrix, the fuel for the engine, just reacting. They don't care. Again, this idea that there are no nations, that goes back to my song from 2008. There are no nations, just one world consumer population. And this social media, this overlay, this idea, the only absolutes I say in the song are Walmart and Target. Those are the enemies. The battleground is budgets. It's money. And, obviously, Walmart and Target are the least of our concerns when we're talking about the military industrial complex. We're talking about the prison industrial complex. We're talking about the medical industrial complex at war. But again, it's not us down here in any sort of left versus right. It's a hierarchy of a machine that's been instilled from the foundation of the United States, for sure. We talked about the cracker in the last episode. If you haven't listened to that, you can see all of my last episodes on YouTube, or hear them rather. But you can find them on jjweinberg.com. If you want to get right to it, it's /perspective. Otherwise, you can check out some of my art and go down the rabbit hole there with me. But we got to demand proof. If you're reacting instead of investigating, then they can sell you anything. One world consumer population. I'm not buying it. There's a great book I read. It's kind of a tangent here. It's called Biology, spelled B-U-Y. And they're studying, the biochemical reactions to branding and marketing. And man, it's a fascinating book, and a lot of this stuff is overlaid there. But it's why fake news has become such a powerful authoritarian phrase. It's so easy to say. Just saying fake news, like that you would say that. Listen, again, I'll go back to my own history. In 2008, I wrote a song called Mediaocracy. And in it, I am fully criticizing this media machine that only, the yellow press, the idea that if it bleeds, it leads. Where's the positivity in our news? All this negative stuff. And this is really not even political. I was just talking about the first verse says, a house fire burned and scarred. Now the family needs a place to stay. A woman trips, falls onto the tracks. Oh, what a way to start the day. And that was a literal news story. It was about this woman falling, tripping on the tracks, dying. There was a house fire, the family. Of course, those are, they're relevant things. But why is it always negative? We rarely get those positive news stories. And again, it's fight or flight triggers. The dopamine, you can get a little bit of a dopamine hit from a positive story, but it's nothing like the trigger of the fight or flight. And that's why when I got arrested, that tactical frivolity, when I got arrested in 2008, it was to hit that nerve on purpose, that alligator brain. And even with the joy of protesting, I'm trying to dance on that thin line. But if a news outlet reports something that actually happened, that's what it was. I woke up and I saw this thing about Kash Patel and the FBI basically recreating the Beastie Boys music video and using the song, which I'm pretty sure the Beastie Boys are going to have contention with. I highly doubt they're going to be signing off on that one. But they basically recreate the music video, and it's taxpayer resources, right? To create a Beastie Boys music video about the FBI. We already saw this with Kristi Noem and that crazy use of money, which again was probably enough to fund a year of public media that she wasted on this crazy propaganda budget film advertisements that then was, of course, Donald Trump supposedly signed off on. Allegedly, she said that he did, and then she gets canned. But regardless, I woke up and it was an NPR story reporting about this video. That's not bias. That's journalism. But in the logic of propaganda, from a side, from, the Kash Patel perspective, or from the right that's supporting, would say that merely documenting reality is an attack if the reality embarrasses the power. That's the inversion that we're talking about. And so the idea, though, too, that public media should be just completely funded by donors. It's made possible by viewers like you. We know that. There are already a lot of donors for public media. But to just say and shift the whole thing to donors, my perspective is like, you should want the state, you should want the government to control an independent reporting identity more so. Not that they control the identity. They should have hands off on what the identity or what the reporting is, but they should be funding it so that they can report to a standard of journalism that is fair, right? Because if you're just saying that you want donors, then that means that the people with the money, the highest donors, like I know people in this left versus right, for some reason, I know Bill Gates is the boogeyman to the right as Elon is to the left. So it's like, then if Bill Gates donates the most money and then those stories, and he says, well, I'm only donating if you do my bidding. Or is it just that the right also conveniently knows that more often people on the other side of a morality will say, I will donate to you, but I don't want you to just say my speaking. I want you to be impartial. Whereas more controlled propaganda mechanisms say, you will do as I say. But the idea of public media versus commercial media, it should cut deep into the partisan framing. A healthy society should want at least one sphere of media that's insulated from advertisers, shareholder pressure, ratings warfare. That's why we get this yellow press. That's why we get this clickbait, the click addiction, sensationalism, billionaires owning it. And then, of course, outrage algorithms, which pull us right back to that yellow press social media perspective. Because commercial media is incentivized towards emotional escalation. Fear performs, rage performs, humiliation performs, panic performs. Nuance doesn't. That's, again, the yellow press problem reborn through algorithms. PBS, NPR, public broadcasting at its best, it's an attempt to preserve a civic and cultural immune system against exactly that kind of collapse. Not perfect institutions, but institutions attempting to prioritize education, culture, imagination, history, science, children, art, conversation, and public literacy over pure market appetite. That's what Mr. Rogers was arguing for. The pure market appetite will just take us down to our most animal, basic, primitive level. And the devastating part is that people attacking it often grew up shaped by Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Sesame Street, Mark Kistler, Bob Ross. And no matter what people are saying now, those weren't programs and they aren't now teaching children to hate America. That's just obscene. They're teaching children imagination, patience, empathy, creativity, emotional intelligence, generosity, gentleness. Bob Ross, the most gentle among us all. But again, they don't want us gentle, emotionally intelligent. They don't want us creative. They certainly don't want us curious, because then we stop being batteries in the machine. I would argue that Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, any of the places where these outrage algorithms are happening, they're part of this thing where they don't want that. They don't want to protect public media. Why would they? And in fact, because of the corporate mechanisms, the way that the corporation works, because you are beholden to your shareholders, because profit margins are all that matters in a corporate machine and a corporate responsibility, they have to do anything to make sure more eyeballs stay on the platform. This is why Fred Rogers might even be mocked by this culture addicted to cruelty as performance. Fred Rogers, the point of Fred Rogers really kind of should reframe this whole thing. He had to defend public media broadcasting to Congress decades ago. And he wasn't defending partisan messaging. He was defending the moral and developmental necessity of compassionate educational media. You're telling me that that's what kids are going to get with a corporate system? You're telling me that, softer spoken, gentler things, like the notion that he says feelings are mentionable and anything that's mentionable is manageable. We're going to hear that somewhere else. We're going to hear that in the bombast of culture wars, and we're going to hear that in the fight or flight cocktail addiction that we have in other media. Like, the idea of what he was saying is that these programs need space and time to mature into their audience, to grab a hold of that audience, because it's not the same as like a Coke bump that you're sniffing up your nose. It's not the sugar rush. It's not listen, I love video games, but it's not the Fortnite phenomenon, because again, that's an addiction of adrenaline that's happening. So Mr. Rogers' famous testimony, if you haven't seen it, go watch it, Google it, find it on YouTube. It still matters because it reveals something terrifying. There have always been forces that view tenderness, imagination, education, and emotional literacy as expendable. Why else would he be fighting for it? So when they're talking about making America great again, when Mr. Rogers was fighting for it in 1969. And so the Million Bob March, again, for me, it's not a partisan protest. It's a defense of imagination as a public good, as creativity, as a civic necessity, as kindness as strength, a public space free from just pure commodification. That whole idea that there are no nations, just one world consumer population. We don't have to commodify creativity. And that cultural institutions, they helped raise generations of Americans. So the key rhetorical move is that we don't get trapped defending a caricature. We have to make people prove that the caricature exists. So the line can cut through the fog of propaganda and survive abstraction, because this question will help things die under specificity. Show me one article. Show me one place where what you're talking about. Because inherited outrage, that's the perspective. Most people, they don't ever actually arrive at many of their beliefs through investigation. They inherit emotional positioning before they ever inherit understanding. They inherit who to boo before they understand the game. And in sports, that's fine. You know, sports are ritualized tribalism. That's part of the fun. The Chicago Cubs versus the White Sox. The Chicago Bears versus the Green Bay Packers. Whatever it is, that rivalry exists and we get animated about it. But man, when it turns to the Palestinians versus the Jews, or the Christians versus the Jews, or the left versus the right, the haves versus the have-nots, the stakes are higher. Us versus them. Like in sports, that's theater. That's this symbolic conflict, the hero's journey. That's people blowing off steam and, building a little identity through playful opposition. But somewhere along the line, we started treating politics, spirituality, morality, and human beings with that same simplistic team logic, that professional wrestling analogy that we've talked about here so many times. Again, perspective, jjweinberg.com/perspective. Not only can you find the link to my YouTube playlist there where you can hear all these past episodes, you can also see some of the articles. I've not written a lot lately because I've been doing, most of my writing is pouring into these radio shows, but I do have some past writing you can look at. One of them specifically about professional wrestling as politics is something you might want to check out. You can find it though. You can find that article though on jjweinberg.com/perspective. But we inherit outrage sometimes the same way we inherit sports fandom. Those are the bad guys. These are our colors. This is what we believe. Don't question it. Don't betray the tribe. I mean, again, with sports, it's fun. Okay? With religion, it's dangerous. With politics, the consequences are way too extreme. To be inheriting with race, culture. I mean, come on, man. But the terrifying thing is that most people, they just never stop long enough to ask, wait, why exactly am I angry? Who handed me this enemy? Eurasia, East Asia, look at 1984 again. Did I arrive here consciously or was I emotionally programmed into it? And even the last two episodes where I was talking about the idea of Zionism, Judaism, Palestinian conflict, and the Christian versus Jews idea. We've talked about fascism and Hitler, all of these things. Am I emotionally programmed into my response? What I was really concerned about, again, is seeing people emotionally responding to something that they're not really digging into a lot. And even if they do, when it comes to the framing of Christianity in the United States, I mean, we are so far off the deeper scholarly knowledge of a Jewish Jesus. But that's, again, those are the last episodes. If you want to listen to that, go back. But in some capacity, I make this point. I don't know if I made it in these episodes, but I talk about it. Jesus did say, leave your family and follow me. And family, I would even That's tribe. But I would look at the root of the word family and having familiar there. Leave the familiar and follow me. And if we go upstream from that and take it away from personalities and families. So if we go upstream from me and upstream from family, we can go, the family would become familiar and the me would become the light or the truth. It doesn't have to be the personality, Jesus. You don't have to believe in the dude, right? So it's leave the familiar and follow the light. Leave the familiar and follow the question, the curiosity, the truth. So we're not talking about abandoning people. We're talking about transcending inherited identity structures when they obstruct the truth. Leave the familiar. Leave the conditioned reflex. As Viktor Frankl says, become human. Be a human being. Decide. Don't let it decide for you. That's why I'm so objectional to the founding daddies, to the idea that someone would wear a t-shirt that has Donald Trump in front of the White House saying daddy's home. Because I don't even care if you have a policy and the politics that you agree with him. That part of it, I can tell you, is unequivocally unhealthy and weird. Daddy's home. That's your daddy? Like, again, my father passed. I was able to have criticisms of my dad while he was here, and I have criticism of him now, and we have peace and healing and back and forth. But daddy? Ugh. I mean, it's just gross. Decide. Become human. A human being is a deciding being. Leave that patriarchy. That patriarchy is just, it's bent on making sure that it stays in control. I'm not saying that it means everything that your father says is wrong. I don't have kids, but if I did, I would hope that they find something in me that's redeemable, of course. I hope that my listeners do. I hope that the people that view my art and everything. But family, tribe, nation, party, ideology, these things can become mirrors that only reflect us back to ourselves. They can prevent an encounter with reality. They can prevent encounter with people. Again, at the beginning of my episode, I'm all of these things and I am none of these things. I'm saying it because even as an artist, I'm not an artist if it means that I don't get to do this, that, or the other. Once outrage becomes inherited, people stop examining it. It becomes sacred. It becomes their identity itself. That's why people defend political parties the way they defend sports franchises, even when the team owner is corrupt, even when the quarterback is a cheater and a narcissist, even when the coach lies to them, even when the whole thing is clearly damaging them materially and spiritually, because inherited outrage isn't rational. It's emotional inheritance masquerading as conviction. That connects directly, I think, to the public media conversation, because propaganda doesn't just tell you what to think. It tells you who to hate. It gives you emotional targets. It gives you preloaded enemies. And once you can emotionally trigger a population faster than they can critically think, then you own them. And that's why outrage media is so profitable. Football, football is our Sunday church. And politics becomes fantasy football for grievance. Wear the jersey. You repeat the chants, boo on command. But unlike sports, the consequences spill into real human lives with this. The inherited outrage can become racial resentment, religious resentment, nationalist resentment, culture war, and then generation after generation inherits emotional debt that they never consciously choose. That's why Viktor Frankl matters so much. Human beings are deciding beings. Meaning isn't merely inherited. Identity isn't inherited. Consciousness allows interruption. The real journey isn't finding a new tribe. It's becoming conscious enough to examine the one that programmed you.
How do we beat the devil out of the fog machine? Bob Ross vibes only.
Perception is reality. Perspective shapes the world around you. I'm JJ Weinberg, and this is my perspective.